Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Romans Education Part 3, and this is Session 2. Right here at the outset, I want to give that prologue again. You remember we were taking a few minutes at the start of each session to talk about the issue of evil. And because we're in justice and injustice, that injustice is a form of evil, and so that's why we're taking the time to look at this. Good and evil are directly related to justice and injustice. And we left off last time as we're about to define evil and to say, here's what evil is. Back in the 13th century, theologians used a couple of Latin words to define evil. I'm going to put them on the board for us here, and then we're going to define them into English. But the first one is negatio. And we talked about this just a tiny bit. I don't remember if it was in the prologue last week or if it was interactive learning. But in the English, that would be negation. The other Latin word is privatio. I don't know why theologians and philosophers love the Latin so much, but if it's not in Latin, it's like they just can't do it. And that is the English word that we would use, privation. Now, let me just explain these two words so that everybody's on the same page, because right now, you may be looking at it and saying, what in the world does that have to do with anything? But it does have to do with answering what we talked about last time as the Achilles heel of theist, in saying that God is good, God is all-powerful, God is all-knowing, and yet there is evil in the world. That's the argument that is used most often to say there is no God. And so what we are offering is, here's your theological word of the day, a theodicy. A theodicy is a defense of God with regards to the fact of evil. And so there are whole books that are written on this, and everybody has ideas about it. And some of them are pretty good, and some of them are pretty bad. So what I'm hoping to do in the first few minutes of every lesson is get us to introduce to one that I think is actually a good one that kind of answers these questions. Now, whenever theologians were defining evil, remember I told you that sometimes when you're defining something that is a bit mysterious or hard to define, we used what is called the way of negation to do that. In other words, it was easy to talk about what something was not. And sometimes when you're thinking about, in fact, when we learned about sonship prayer, the first way you learned about it was to learn what it wasn't, and then you had a frame of reference that you could discover what it was. And so when you're talking about evil, then what they did is they often talked about it in frame of what it is not. So in a very simplistic way, let me just say that that you would understand what evil is only if you understood what good was. You would understand what injustice was if you understood what justice was, because injustice, that evil is not justice. And so they use that way of negation. Now let's look at this other term, privation. That indicates that there's some sort of lack or deficiency. In other words, if you don't get something that you absolutely need, you could say you are deprived. And so that's really the sense of privation. And so privation is understood in this sense. Let me give you an example. Here's an animal that suffers a wound. And what is a wound? Well, the wound in the sense of what we're talking about here is the privation of the animal's wellness or wholeness or health. Okay? In other words, so there's something lacking now about one of those three. And so the evil, and by the way, I'm using it this way because we'll see it in a minute, there are categories of evil. In other words, not every evil is the way you think about it in your mind. The way most people think about evil is moral evil. But there are actually other evils, and so, here's an animal that's been injured, or here's a tsunami that wipes out a city, or here's a hurricane that does that. So all those things in philosophy, that's a different kind of evil that's at loose in the world. So I'm just going to use this case of the animal. So we're going to call the wound bad or the wound evil, not in the sense of moral evil, but in the sense that it is a privation of the animal's health or well-being, or maybe even function. Okay, and because of that, when the wholeness of that creature is restored, when the wound heals, when the health or the function of that creature is restored, then guess what? The evil ceases to exist. When the wound is gone, and so like evil, remember what I told you last week? Evil is not a self-existent thing. Remember, evil is not some invisible thing that's wandering the earth looking for something to do any more than a wound is. There is no invisible wound beast out there that is looking for ways to do it. It is the privation of something good. That's what evil is. Evil is the change from, in this case, the animal's health or wholeness or function. And so, although the wound is, or that evil, that wound, is real, it's not just an illusion, even though it's real, it is not a sentient thing that self-exists and guides its own course. It is just the privation of the good. And so theologians and philosophers use this kind of terminology to define the healing. But then in the 16th century, about 300 years later, guys came along that began to say, because they took these things kind of to an extreme, and they began to say that then, you know what, evil, okay, it's not a thing in and of itself, and once it's there, it doesn't direct itself, it just sort of is what it is. They said then evil is really not real, it is just an illusion. But evil is not an illusion. Evil is real. And it has real effects. So in the 16th century, they came up with another term, actuoso. Of course, it has to be in Latin, of course. Can't do it in English. And so in the 16th century, they come up with actuoso, which says, and actually they put it in with this. So it'd be privatio actuoso. They actually made a combined term out of it. And this says that evil is real and its effects are real and devastating. So that was to do away with the idea that evil was just an illusion. Now let me take you to the PowerPoint, and now I want to show you here's where we're at so far. So number one, evil exists. Now I want you to notice where I'm going here. That's the actuoso. That it's real. Evil exists, but it is not self-existent like you are. Okay? So that's the negation. Everybody see that? That's what evil is not. See, we're defining it by that. Here's the second one. Evil is not a substance, a person, or a force. And because I'm telling you what it's not, I'm using the way of negation to define evil. Here's the third one. Evil is a part of reality. That's the actuoso part. And not an illusion. That's the negation part. You understand what I'm doing here is I'm taking all three of these parts and I'm using them all so that we can understand some things about evil. Number 4, evil is not a creation of God. Now, I want to stress that one, and we'll be talking more about that in the lessons ahead. Number 5, evil is the negation or deprivation of good. Now, the thing I want to talk about in the last couple of minutes here is this idea of cosmic dualism. Let me explain to you what that is. This is the idea that reality consists of, now you have to follow this carefully, two eternal opposite forces, like God and Satan. The reason theists, believers in God, reject that is because Satan is not eternal. He's a created being. He wasn't there when God was there before the beginning. And so we reject the idea of cosmic dualism, that from the beginning there was more than just a good, omnipotent God, but there was also an evil, eternal something else. And the people that cite this want to make Satan, most of the time, the evil counterpart, but even he came to a creation. So only God is the necessary being. Everything else comes from him. Okay, so that's important. Why? Because it tells you evil wasn't always. Now, I want to give you number 6. Evil is not eternal, it is not personal, and it is not equal to God. I think everybody kind of understands that. Number 7, evil cannot exist apart from the good. I want to dwell on this one just for a moment. Evil cannot exist apart from the good. So if the animal suffers a wound, guess what? In order for it to be a privation of its health or function, you actually have to have health or function in order to detract from it. Everybody understand? In other words, in order for there to be an injustice, there has to be a justice. There has to be something that's just. In order for something to be unrighteous, there has to be something that is righteous. So the point, there's 2 parts to this. I only put one in yellow because that's just the part where we're defining evil. Evil cannot exist apart from the good, but good can exist without evil. And that's the important thing to get from this. Everybody understand that? In other words, you can have that which is good, but it doesn't necessitate evil. But you cannot have a deprivation unless you have something to deprive it of. Okay, so I haven't said that. Number 8, and this is the last one. Evil is the absence, privation, or lack of something good. Now, I just gave you extra commentary there, but rather in a living thing, we talked about the animal just a moment ago, or in God's intentions for the moral created order. And I'm giving you examples of immorality or ungodliness. That would be privation. So not all evil is the same. So the last thing that I want to talk to you about is 4 categories of evil. And then we're going to zero in on one of them in the weeks ahead. And so here they are. Number 1. I didn't give them to you. So let me put them on the board. So number 1, physical evil. Physical evil are the things, think of the sufferings of this present time. The things that happen because why? Why do the sufferings of this present time happen? Why do you fall off a ladder and break your arm? Why does someone who's texting run into you at the red light? Why does a tornado sweep through and tear up your barn? Why Why do the sufferings of this present time happen? That's part of what? Yeah, it's part of just living in a fallen world. That's where that comes from. Now, really, some of those things in that list come from us being careless. But again, that's kind of part of living in a fallen world. Okay, so they're physical evil. Yeah. Yeah, it would be things like acts of nature. These are 4 types of evil, 4 ways to look at evil. Some of these are not going to be in the purview that we're going to be discussing over the weeks ahead. We're not going to be looking at every aspect of evil. There's really just one central kind of evil that I think is important for us to look at, and that's moral evil. So the first one is physical evil. That has to do with acts of nature, or the things that we would call the sufferings of this present time. It's just the things that happen to you. Someone gets cancer, and where does that come from? It's just part of living in a fallen world. Number 2 is moral evil, and that is the one that we mostly think of when we think of evil. That's the one that we're going to focus on. But I just want to give it to you. And you know what this is? This includes sin and rebellion. So let me just put them up there. Sin and rebellion and 100 other things that we could put in that list. Things like disobedience. Here's a big one. We're studying justice. You know what would fall under that? Injustice. Okay. The third one is satanic evil. And that is what is called, most of the time when philosophers talk about this kind of evil, they call it supernatural evil. In other words, it's not from men, and it's not from the elements of nature, and when cold fronts and hot climates combine and storms result and all those kinds of things. They're saying that this is it. We would call this the evil that comes from the policy of evil that Satan is working in this world, and it would find its origins in the adversary. Here's the last one, and this one is interesting to me. You do need to know about it. Metaphysical evil. Now, don't let that term scare you, because I want to talk to you about what that means, and so that you have an idea of what metaphysical evil is. And I know that sounds like some kind of New Age concept, that what in the world is that? But let me describe it to you by explaining to you about the creation. There are some things that God cannot do. You need to understand that because of who He is, there are things that God cannot do. Like the Bible says, God cannot lie. There's another, and so here's the other thing. God cannot oppose Himself. There's that conundrum everybody comes up with. If God can do anything, can He make a rock so big that even He can't move it? Well, if He can't move it, He's not omnipotent. But if He can't make it, He's not omnipotent. You see, what you've done is you've created a false premise. You can't have the thesis oppose itself. And so, but people come up with that, and they think it's a wise little saying. They don't understand the nonsense of something like that. And so there's something else God cannot do. God cannot reproduce Himself in the creation. God can't make an identical copy of Himself. Somebody tell me why. Because He is eternal. He is from everlasting to everlasting. Whatever He makes is not from everlasting. It's a creature, which means it's been created. It's not eternal. And therefore, God cannot perfectly reproduce himself. And because he cannot reproduce himself, there are attributes that cannot be communicated to the creation. There are some that can. You remember back a few weeks ago when I talked about the image of God, and we talked about those communicable attributes? Do you remember that? We talked about intelligence. Where did we get that? Got that from the Lord. Emotions. Where did we get that? Preferences. Free will. I mean, the list, remember we made this whole long list. These are attributes of God that he communicated to us as his creatures, which we needed in order to function as those made in the image of God, as his imagers. But there are other attributes that God could not give us. These are why they're the communicable attributes. There's some he couldn't give us. Name one. What's an attribute God possesses that he could not give to us? Omnipotence, right? Huh? Yeah, we're not eternally existent. We're not omnipotent. What else? We're not omniscient. We don't know everything. But there's one in particular that I'm looking for, and it has to do with this issue of good and evil. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to use a different word, but so that everybody will be thinking about it the same way. Linda said, we're not good. Here's the real thing. But let's go back before Adam sinned in the garden. There's something that Adam could not have been given by virtue of the fact that he is a created being and not God. And it has to do with what you're talking about, Linda, so take that further. Because you could look at Adam back there and say he wasn't bad before the fall.
Sinless.
Okay, he that's true. He hadn't sinned yet, so he was sinless. I'm looking for a different word.
Righteous.
Okay, keep going. Give me something else. It's the word.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, that's what I'm after right there. He wasn't perfect. Does God have a free will? Yes. But because of who he is, God's free will not allow him, because he is perfectly righteous, perfectly holy, perfectly good. God's free will not allow him to commit evil. But man, being a creator, this is what metaphysical evil is. It is the evil that is possible for us because we're not the creator, we're just the creature. Because God can't duplicate, because it is the very essence of what makes God different from his creation. So when you create man and you give him a free will, which by the way God has to do if man is actually going to be what he created him to be. So if you give man, now I know someone right now who has looked at theodicies before, and you've looked at this whole concept of good and evil. You're going to say, oh, Brother Mike, please don't tell me that you're going to pin everything on free will, because that really doesn't answer all the ultimate questions down the road. No, that's not what I'm doing. What I am doing is saying there's a combination of things here that come into play when you're talking about metaphysical evil. And that means Adam was not created to be evil. He was not created to do evil. But the ability for him to deprive the good is in him because he has free will. And the reason it's in him is because he is not God. There it is. Because if he were God, it wouldn't matter if he had free will. He's still perfectly right. Everybody understand? He's still perfectly righteous. But because you can't duplicate that. You can't take the perfection of God's holiness and righteousness to the core of his being and give it to the creature any more than you can create Adam and make him eternally existent. And I think that's why Richard mentioned that a while ago, because he understood. That's a bit. So you can't. Those are non-communicable attributes. So if you, you know what? And every parent thinks this of their kids. Even though as a parent you know what ought to be done in a certain situation, you know when you turn your kids loose that even though you hope they'll remember what they were taught and who they are and whose name is at stake there, but guess what? You don't have the ability to say it's not possible for them to make a wrong choice. If they have free will, it's not just possible. It's probable. You know, so does everybody, so when we talk about metaphysical evil, we're talking about not the fact that that Adam was made intrinsically evil, but that there was the possibility of evil because he wasn't God. And he had free will. So if you take who you are as a creature and you give it free will, does that mean it has to do evil? No. But does it mean it can do evil? That's exactly right. And that's where we are. That's what's interesting about metaphysical evil when you're trying to get now down to the question of where did evil come from? Because the easier question is, what is it? We've already talked about it. It's the opposite of the good. It's the deprivation of the good. And it is real, and it has real effects. And then I gave you 8 things about what evil is and evil is not. I gave you that long list. Now we're talking about the kinds of evil. I wanted you to understand this one because this one actually has a bearing on this one. And moral evil is the one that we're going to be focused on. Because people have an idea that if God created evil, if he hadn't done that, there wouldn't be any evil in the world. That's why I gave you that number 4 point back there. I'm sorry. Yeah. Evil is not a creation of God. There is no thing that God created called evil that creeps around looking to do things. God didn't do that. That's why it was important for you to understand that evil is the deprivation of the good. And you can have good without evil, but you cannot have evil without good. Because if there's nothing to deprive, there is no deprivation. Everybody gets that. Okay. Back to the books. So there we are. And I finished that little piece. And so now we'll turn to Romans chapter 12 and verse 17. So let me catch us back up on the deal. All of these little prologues together, I think are going to make a very interesting study, and I'm glad we're kind of spreading them out so we get them in small bites. Romans chapter 12, verse 17 says, recompense to no man evil for evil. Can you see how important this is going to be for a study of justice? Because the very first verse, as we study godly justice, is going to tell you, recompense to no man evil for evil. If you don't understand the concepts of evil, this won't have the impact on you it's designed to have. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Now, normally when people read this passage, their mind goes back to something that Jesus said to the little flock. It's recorded back in the gospel accounts, especially back in the book of Matthew. And when they read in Romans 12 things like don't avenge yourselves and leave vengeance up to God, and if your enemy hungers, then feed him. And And then they think Romans 12 then, because of this language, recompense to no man evil for evil, they're thinking, oh, this is very similar to what Jesus talked about back over there to the little flock. And I want to spend some time with this because I think the Matthew passage is very misunderstood. And so the sermon that Jesus preaches to the members of the remnant, the little flock, is corrective doctrine. Let's take it up in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. You have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Do you see why this looks real close to Romans 12? Look at Romans 12. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Jesus says, you have heard it been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What does that look like? It looks like evil for evil, doesn't it? But here's a big difference. So let me get this off the board because I want to make the difference for you. This is why it's important to not just rightly divide the word, but it is important to really think about what is being said. Because what's happening in Romans 12 is talking about how you respond to injustices personally. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Where did that come from? I mean, Jesus quoted it. What'd you say, Barb? Yeah, it came from the law of Moses. And you know what? The law of Moses was not about your personal feelings. It was the established law of the land. So you know what the law of Moses is doing? That's the written law on how they're going to deal with lawbreakers. That has nothing to do with your personal response. If you're going to do personal response, you would say this. You know what? If a guy accidentally bumped me in the supermarket, I'm going to go over and bump him back. See, I'm just saying that's in the personal realm. And here's what Paul is saying. If you're going to live peaceably as much as you can with all men, don't do that. But if you're talking about governmental justice, it is going to exact that toll. So that's the first thing I want to say. So it's not a personal issue. It's not like two men in a fist fight. An eye for an eye is from the law of Moses, and it was punishment for an injustice that someone committed. Now what I'd like for us to do is go back and see this in Exodus 21. So look with me. Exodus 21:22. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, in other words, she loses the baby, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. Is this a legal matter like would be taking place in a court of law? Yes. And if any mischief follow, in other words, he assaults a woman, and that baby is delivered, okay, but it's okay, or the woman herself is not injured further, then he's going to pay according to the judges tell him. But if there's a death, if the baby dies, if mischief follows, or this woman is beaten to death, let's say, if mischief follows, here's what it says. Then thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. You know what that's establishing? It doesn't matter what it is. If this is what happens, then you're going to get exactly what you gave. That's right, exactly right. And we looked at last week in Genesis chapter 9 when Noah got off the boat and God said, from now on, I'm going to require the life of a man if he sheds the blood of another man. It cost him his life. Now, if a man were to injure someone so you get that. I don't need to reread that. But the point here is that Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 41 are about legal matters. where someone has been found guilty in front of magistrates, and now there are consequences to be paid. That's not what Romans 12 is talking about. Everybody with me so far? So the reason I'm doing this is because people remember the Matthew 5 passage, and they want to equate that to Romans 12. But in Matthew 5, we're talking about the law, and in Romans 12, we're talking about your personal response to injustice. So look with me in Leviticus chapter 24 and verse 19. And if a man cause a blemish in his neighbor, as he hath done, so shall it be done to him. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he hath caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again. And he that killeth a beast, he shall restore it. And he that killeth a man, he shall be put to death. You shall have one manner of law, as well for the stranger, for the Gentiles that come in and lived among them, as for one of your own country, for I am the Lord your God. He said, if there, you know what, whoever's in Israel, this is the law, and it applies to all of you. Okay. Now, I'm telling you that when Matthew 5, when Jesus is talking about that, he is talking about the legal system as put forth by the Mosaic law and the penalties that go along with that. Now, even though Jesus is about to correct the corrupted doctrine of the Pharisees, because what they did is they took the law and they corrupted it, and they manipulated it for their own purposes. We call this Israel's vain religious system. And the point here is that Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 41, is about the behavior of the little flock. You know who I'm talking about when I say little flock, right? The believing remnant of those that believe that Jesus is the prophesied Messiah of Israel. He is talking to them. That's his people. That's his followers, his believers. He's talking to them, and he's going to talk to them about three things. Number one, when an offense is committed against you. Number two, when you commit offense against someone else. And number three, what happens when you violate the law of the land. So with those three things in mind, take you to your note taker, and we'll fill that in. So here they are. The three legal matters of Matthew 5, 38 to 41 are, number one, when an offense is committed against them. And the them are those justified members of the little flock. Continuing in your note taker, the second one is when those members of the little flock themselves have committed an offense. What should they do? And number three, he is going to talk to them in connection with the established law of the land. Now, we're going to read through this passage because I want you to be able to see in the context, this is exactly what's being explained. So in verse 39, the issue is when some member of the little flock has been offended or injured in some way, doesn't have to be a physical injury, but someone has done something to one of them. And the example that Jesus uses is, if one smites thee on the cheek. Now, here's the verse. I'll leave that up just for a minute longer because I know it's a lot to write. But we're going to read the verse here, and there's a couple of phrases that I think are misunderstood when we read this. So I want us to look at this and examine this carefully. And the reason I'm spending time on the Matthew 5 part of this and not just going directly to the Romans 12 is because, again, people take these and act like they're talking about the exact same thing and they want to treat them the same. And that leads to a perverted understanding of justice. So I want to try to fix that. So here we are. Matthew chapter 5, verse 39. But I say unto you that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now, the couple of phrases that I mentioned to you a moment ago are the resist not evil, and let's define that evil. It's not referring to just any kind of evil. It's not the evil of sin or the evil of false doctrine or the evil of Satan. Remember when I should have left those up on the board. Remember we talked about those 4 categories of evil. He's not talking about satanic or supernatural evil. You would resist that one. But this one is something else. The evil here is some kind of offense or injury or injustice that is perpetrated against you by someone else. And the evil of Matthew 5:39 is not a circumstance like you fell off a ladder. You understand what I'm talking about, and broke your arm. But it is an injury of the eye for an eye kind. Okay. So some have taken that phrase to mean, resist not evil, that you cannot defend yourself. That's not what is being talked about here. What's happening here is, if someone were to attack you in some way, can you biblically ward off that attack and defend yourself? Of course you can, and we're going to talk about that later in the study when we can focus just on that element. But I just want to say that for now. I believe the answer biblically is yes. I'll show you why. But what he's saying here is, don't take the matter of justice into your own hands. There is a legal recourse for that. So let me give you an example. We had some folks that were visiting here from Oregon. You probably remember they had a big family, and they came and visited, and they were here on a Sunday. And I took them out to eat over at Texas Roadhouse in Odessa. We were leaving. Now, they were in a van because there was like about 8 of them, I think. And so we couldn't fit everybody in one car. So we had our car, and then they had their van. And so on the way out of the restaurant, he said, hey, before we go home, I need to stop at a gas station and get some gas. And I said, okay. Well, there's a gas station right here on the corner where we're fixing to turn on 42nd Street. It's a technical, I think. You just stop right there and get gas. Billy and I just pulled off to the side, not where the pumps were, because I didn't want to block anybody. He pulled into one of those aisles where the pumps. There was someone at the first pump nearest to the store. He came in behind them and was filling up on that pump. While he was filling up, there was a guy in a pickup truck that was backing up. He had pulled in just to the store. So as he's backing up, he's backing toward the cars that are in the pumps. He's about to back. It looks like he doesn't see the guy that's in front of these Oregon folks, and is about to bump into his car. And the guy is looking, and he sees it, so he runs up and he reaches through his window and he hits the horn, beep, 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 to say, hey, I'm here, don't back into me. Now, he can't move out of the way. He's parked at the gas pump. But there's another car that is kind of sliding by all of that, and the guy in the pickup truck doesn't realize he's being honked at by a guy he's about to back into. He thinks this other guy that's kind of going around all of that is honking at him because he's in the way. That guy goes around the pumps and starts up the side of the building so he can turn back out on 42nd Street. Billy and I watched this guy in the pickup truck throw it in drive, peel around to the edge of the building, get out of the building, and fire 4 shots with a handgun at the guy he thought was honking at him. What's really incredible about that is sitting in the median of the street. I mean, here's the station, then there's Discount Tire, then there's Texas Roadhouse. Right in front of Discount Tire, in the turn lane, like you're going to go into H-E-B there, the wheel has fallen off the axle of a car. And there's 2 police cars out there, and they're out of their cars directing traffic around so that, that till they can get this car moved out of the way. I know they hear those shots. I know they do. And I'm looking at this guy fire off those shots at this vehicle, and Billy is looking at me, and she goes, what do? I said, don't make eye contact. I don't look at him like, how dare you? He's already in the mood. Let's just let discretion be the better part of valor here. So, so here's my point. The guy in the other vehicle, if you say, if it's you, Brother Mike, what are you going to do? Now, look, do I carry a firearm in my cars? I do. But you know what? I'm going to contact the authorities for a couple of reasons. Number one, when you take that kind of thing into your own hands, you're really putting you and the people with you at risk. Do you want to do that? Number two, that's what they're there for. Well, they're supposed to be. So I'm going to do that. And this is what this verse is talking about. Don't take this into your own hands. In other words, you know what? I could wait, and here's what, and someone would think this way. Your apostle is going to tell you to look at this differently. You say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to avoid this for now, but you know what? I'm going to wait up here. I'm going to follow that guy, and when he gets home, I'm going to shoot him up when he gets out of the car. This is what Paul is saying. No. If someone does this, there is a recourse for you. Do not take that into your own hands. And that's what the whole issue of turn the other cheek is about, not taking justice into your hands to do that. Now, that's when someone has done something to you. Now, the next thing, and I realize that the buzzer went off and I have a long ways to go, but let me just at least get through these next two deals in Matthew. Okay. So, just to give you the Oxford English Dictionary definition, and let me do that. Resist not evil. Look, of persons to strive against by attack, invasion, blow, or hostile action of any kind. So that's what he's talking about. That when you resist not evil, in other words, don't wait for your opportunity and now I'm going to get, you know what, I'm going to do to him what he did to me. That is the job of the official. Because you know what? If you do that, you're going to go to prison. And you say, well, they have to catch me. All the caveats aside, Paul is saying there's a lot of reasons not to. And this is one of them. By the way, when we talk about justice, anyway. So, and so I see two things here. Jesus is saying this to his little flock, that if someone does something to you, your goal is not to try to find an opportunity to do it back to them. You have a recourse for that, which allows you to remain good, innocent, right, just. Okay. And that's not anything really new, so let me just show you. Here's Proverbs 22:20. Say not thou, I will recompense evil. Now this is back in Israel's program, you understand. Say not thou, I will recompense evil, but wait on the Lord, and he shall save thee. Then Proverbs 24:29. Say not, I will do so to him as he hath done to me. I will render to the man according to his work. See, all the way back, by the way, when did these get written? This is written by Solomon. All the way back to Solomon, this has been in Israel's scriptures. So this is not a new thing in Matthew chapter 5. Same kind of thing that Paul is going to talk about, but he's not going to do that in Romans until chapter 13. So this idea is in play for a long time. And so what he is doing, I gave you the scripture in Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 16, because what the Lord is trying to do here is to actually put the law back in its proper context instead of the way that the religious leaders of Israel had actually taken that law where it meant to serve a good purpose and perverted it. And it says, bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples, and I will wait upon the Lord that hideth his face from the house of Jacob, and I will look for him. Behold, this is a prophecy about Jesus. Behold, I am the children whom the Lord hath given me, that's those disciples, are for signs and for wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth in Mount Zion. And you notice at the very first, in verse 16, he talks about bind up the testimony and seal the law among my disciples. He's going to restore it back to the place that it was meant to be. Okay, now, Jesus is also saying to his little flock, for minor things, you don't have to take every single thing to a magistrate. So I'll give you an example. When I lived in Carrollton, there was a water ban. It was a real dry season and supplies were down, and so they made it, and they said if your address ends in an even number, you can water your lawn or wash your car on these days. And if your address is in an even number, then you get these other days. That way everybody's not using water all the time, Neil. So I wait till my day, and I'm washing my car in the driveway. And so some neighbor across the street called the police. And so the guy came over and he said, we have to come out. We get the call. I have to come out. I know your address is, ends in an odd number. Today is your day. But we have to come out and we have to follow up. And I did. And he said, he said, it looks like you're being careful with the water. Please just do that. And off he went. See, this would be a good lesson for the person who had nothing better to do than to look out their window at who was actually obeying the law and then wasting police resources on that. Not everything required. By the way, that I didn't do anything wrong, but you know what? There's some things that if somebody does something, you don't have to, resort to the direst measures possible to do it. Some things you can just overlook. I've done that before. I had a lady that, we're at a red light and her foot was on the brake, but I guess, she wasn't concentrating and the car is just creeping forward little by little, and it bumped me in the back. And when she realized it, I know she came to her senses, and, we just got out and looked at it. She said, I'm so sorry. And I said, hey, it's fine. There's no problem here. We just went on. I didn't need to call the police and let's make an incident report and let me get a hold of my insurance company and let me do it. I had better sense than that. I understood what it was. And so I think the Lord is also saying that. And by the way, so Jesus is not promoting a pacifist lifestyle. That's what a lot of people want to get out of this. But he is promoting a peacemaker lifestyle. All right, so I'm not going to get as far as I'd like to get, so I guess we'll just start. I did. It took too long to start. But but there are two more that we're going to have to look at here. This first one has to do with what happens when someone has done. He's saying to the little flock, what happens when somebody does something to you? When we pick this up in verse 40 next time, we're going to be talking about what happens when a member of the little flock commits an injustice to someone else, because that happens. This is going to be interesting for us to look at. And then, of course, we'll do the last one in verse 41. Okay, so we'll stop here.